ENA asked if I would champion the asset management power and improvement initiative for this year, which I was very happy to do. In terms of what power and improvement is, so obviously quite a few of you around the table are recognised from various events, and you'll be well aware of power and improvement. Not everybody is, and the more we can communicate what it's about in terms of being cross-sector, whether you're an employer or employee, trade union, whatever your sort of representation, it is about us all aiming to work together, for the good of safety in the workplace. As it says, it's about continuous improvement. As Western Power Distribution, I said this at the ENA SHE conference a few months ago. We went from having our best ever safety performance year in 2016 to having a fatality at the end of January this year. So, you can never, ever rest on your laurels. It's a continuous push, and it always will be. There'll never be a day when we can all sort of sit back and go, well, that's it, we cracked it. It's the nature of working, I guess. In terms of strategy of power and improvement, as it says, it's about trade unions, HSE, and contractors all working together. So whether you're an outsourced type organisation or whether you've got a high percentage of direct labour, really important that we don't lose sight of safety, in terms of any of those relationships. Really pleased to say that we've got HSE representation here today. HSE have always been, very strong partners in terms of power and improvement, and that's clearly really important. As it says, the overarching philosophy there, it's about leadership. We need to make sure that safety is a value within our organisations, and a really important one. Worker involvement, competence in the workplace, and finally their corporate memory, and I'll touch on that a bit later. So in terms of the background to power and improvement, where we are 2015 to 2019, it's a sort of rolling five-year plan with a sort of check year. So 15 was about contractors, 16 occupational health, really good output from that. Again, if you go to the ENA website, there's some really good OC health guidance there, and like an interactive roadmap. I think it's fantastic. Certainly not the usual sort of staid, here's a PowerPoint presentation type stuff. It's quite interactive and gives you some really good leads into where you can get decent information. Asset management this year, next year human and organisational factors, and then 19 again, it's a check year, review progress, what are we doing for the next 5 years? So this is a continuous process. You've all got input to that. When we get to 19 and the review progress, what are we doing next? All of the organisations represented around this table have got an opportunity to say what you think is important. It's not about Western Power Distribution's view or the ENA view, it's about a collective view. So asset management and safety. You'd expect a sort of a definition thing there. So asset management, systematic and organised practices through which an organisation optimally manages its physical assets and their associated performance risks and expenditures. So it's a lot of words, isn't it, to say I think what we all understand by asset management. I think the key one is the one highlighted is risks. So what are the risks? So they could be reputational, it could be commercial, but the most important is it could be the risk of actually harming somebody, whether that's one of our own staff, a contractor, or a member of the public. I did this short presentation at the SHE conference, and something when I was looking into this, I thought was quite interesting was how it aligns to good safety management processes. So the two are very, very similar. You couldn't always see that relationship between the two, but I'm pleased to say the sort of asset management world, I think, have sort of tacked back towards safety, for want of a better description, and the two are very sort of harmonious. So as it says there, 5501 talks about leadership, planning, operation, and performance evaluation, and HSG 65 is the plan, do, check, act. And the two are very similar, which I'll show you. But as it says, you can't achieve your organisational goals if assets aren't reliable. So it's about, determining your policies for getting your assets in, how you're going to install them, looking after them. Data acquisition's a real growing area for all of us as we move towards smart networks. There's a lot more data out there on what's happening with assets, what's happening with networks in particular in our case. And that's going to inform us, excuse me, going forward in terms of how we change maybe maintenance intervals, so how we change the use case on assets and things like that. And it's being alive to that. And finally, there, asset failures. As I say, they generate business risks as well as safety. So I did this little diagram. Credit to EA Technology who are here today. I sort of met up with Robert Davis, their CEO, to talk about this some time ago, and we sort of scribbled some things out. I managed to draw it in PowerPoint or whatever this was, but I've just got there basically the asset management and the safety in terms of, so safety being the plan. Planning something, you go to the do, you check what you've done, and then you act on that information. And asset management being planning, operation, evaluate performance, and then review it. So you can see tremendous synergy there. What we added to that is then, if you like, the different ends, perhaps, of the impact of all of that. So on the right-hand side, the external environment there. So we've got, well, how does what we do with our assets interact with our customers? So whether it could be all sorts of sectors represented here today. For us, it's distribution assets and electricity. But it could be, it's gas. We've got gas representatives here today as well. And so how that you deliver that to the customer and how you can impact on the customer if you don't get it right. So, in our case, either, the lights could be out, which could have safety implications in itself, power off, or obviously it could be a failure of an asset causing injury to somebody. And the customer requirements is a big part of the end of that process. So you've got the environment you operate in and what it is customers expect. On the other end of both of these, you've got compliance and the legal sort of regulatory. So we've got, as an organisation that are regulated, we've got to meet Ofgem requirements. But likewise, we've got to meet, so regulatory, we've got to meet the health and safety requirements as well. So you've got your basically all your activities in the middle there, but they're interacting on the customers at the one end and all of your output reporting and health and safety executive, regulatory compliance on the other. So the reason I drew it was mainly just to see that, I don't see asset management, as a traditional thing in organisations, perhaps like electricity companies. It would have sat, in some dark, distant sort of, well, actually it tended to be in the big white office, didn't it? But, head office over here, and then you've got all the guys down this end, in the southwest, trying to deliver it. For instance, traditionally for us, the two are very, very integrated. So 2017, asset management. We're building on 2012 because that was the theme of 2012 as well. Probably a key thing this time is it is aligned with HSE's initiative, which has helped Great Britain work well. So that's a strategy that the health and safety have got. It's very good. If those of you who've been to some of the conferences, HSE have taken a far more proactive approach these days. I think they've got some good comms people there now, sort of promoting what it is they're trying to achieve, promoting the sort of, I think, a more interactive approach to their strategy. We all support that. We're also going to review it and consider the effectiveness of asset management in the context of new technology, and I think Paul might be talking a little bit about that, or one of the other guys this afternoon. As I said, if we go from passive to smart, we are changing how we operate our equipment. Paul, Jewel and I have talked about this. We put switches out on the network traditionally that would be operated, an air brake isolator, for instance, maybe a couple of times a year. Well, as we go to dynamic networks and we motorise them, or we change their use, we might be moving load around using remote control. It could be 4 times a day. So suddenly you go from a switch that's designed maybe for a whole life of 1,000 operations, you could rattle through 1,000 operations in a year. So real simple example of how you might not necessarily be thinking about that. Well, it's a switch, it opens, it closes, and there's no problem with that. But actually, there may be a problem because you're changing how it's used. So again, we need to ensure that we're keeping on top of that. Some benchmarking activity we're doing there. And the last one there, update and revise asset management corporate memory. And the corporate memory is a really important part of what we do in power and improvement, but also E&A sort of safety, the safety team there, because it's very easy, as we all know, to things happen, people are injured or worse, but it's a generational thing. Apprentices come through, well, they weren't around when that happened 5 years ago. So unless somebody explains it to them, they've got no knowledge at all of it. And then something else happens and the next generation don't know about it. So it's really important. It's not sort of a doom and gloom message, but it is really important. And one of the things, we've picked up this year from the fatality we had is that, we looked at it and said, well, our apprentices, do they really understand some of what's happened before? And our intake this year, we've actually adapted the process on intake to do a sort of behavioural safety with, we use an external organisation with actors, and it's quite dramatic. Some of you around the table have seen that. And we're going to do that with our apprentices. And I won't describe it as shock and awe, but it is about waking them up to things that can happen. So I'm just going to finish really with a couple of challenges for all of us, Western Power included. I said about as technology and the use of it changes, what are you doing? So what are you doing in your organisation to make sure that you've covered off potential risks, additional risks that might manifest themselves 1-2 years time, but we've not really thought about. The asset strategy going forward, are you taking account of what happened and the learning from the past? And finally, I just put there, don't think of assets as just sort of the grey boxes in our context of a distribution operator. It's human assets as well and interface issues. So I put skills, training, operational human factors. It's not just about as we change the use of the technology, it's also about making sure our staff keep up with that change of use. So, are they fully aware of the functionality? Are they fully aware of how you operate things, the different way things operate? And I don't think I've been in the electricity industry since 1992, and I've said this a few times where, it was a pretty, one could argue fairly boring, if that's perhaps a bit harsh, but, fairly steady Eddie, nothing much has changed. But I think the last 5 years, and it's changed dramatically in terms of, moving from a distribution network operator to a system operator, and how we're going to get better use out of our network to serve a greater demand and greater generation at set distributed activities. It's really changed. And going forward, that pace of change is going to continue. So certainly from an electricity viewpoint, and I'm sure it's the same in the other sectors represented around the tables today, things are moving at a pace, and we've got a responsibility to make sure we keep up with it. So that's the introduction from myself. Now hand over to David Van Kesteren from Northern Power Grid, who is speaking as a prospect representative at this stage, I believe.
So as Phil said, I work for Northern Power Grid, but I am here representing the trade unions today. I work in asset management. The first thing I'd just like to say is, first of all, I'm going to press the wrong button on the zapper, but let's see. No, I got it right. Okay, so I work in Northern Power Grid in asset management, but even though I've got asset management in the title, I'm not the only bit of the business that does asset management. And it's important to recognise that asset management is a life cycle thing. You need to get it in your mind. It's not just planning at the beginning and setting the policies and letting things go. There's a lot more to it. But you do need to specify your systems, and some of those people are sitting in the part of the business I'm in, and the design. So we get involved in the technical design. Other parts of the business do the detailed physical design. You've got the installation, operation of the equipment, maintenance, investigations on equipment, repairs, and ultimately decommissioning and hopefully replanting, and we start again, specifying what we want next, design, install, and so it goes round. The key thing I want to follow up with is the same message that Phil's given you, is that asset management isn't just about what I call that core function. Virtually every person in our business is carrying out some form of asset management, and they're contributing to the process, whether it's the people doing data inputting, the people collecting data on site, physically operating the equipment. So how does trade union involvement get in there? Well, all our members are involved in all of those activities. And the 4 recognised trade unions all contribute together. So we are really the eyes and ears of the company. And we've got our important role to play in our own safety and other people's safety. So the company recognises the benefits of the trade unions in terms of it's someone where a collective voice can come together and share issues with the company, but it works both ways. The company can use those representatives to actually share messages and get things across back to the workforce in a different way from the direct management structure. So recognising those benefits, the trade unions have been on the HESAC for many years, and we are directly sponsoring the powering improvement, and I sit on the working group along with a colleague of mine and the HSE and the company representatives to put together the information that we want to put across to you in a shared way. So I'm really just here to say that we are very supportive of what's going on, and it's about working together to get the best results for everyone. So I know that's a lot shorter than the 10 minutes I was given. So now I'm going to look to find out whether Paul has arrived or not. Have we got Paul? No, okay. So we're going to move straight on to the case study that Richard is going to introduce for us from SSE. We will get some breaks later, but as Phil mentioned, once we've got the case study going, there'll be an opportunity for you to informally nip out, get yourselves a coffee and bring it back in so that we can keep the whole process moving.